Hey, welcome to Table Tennis Philosophy. I'm John Gustafson. Today we're going to talk about a way to look at your table tennis game, to look at your whole game. And I got this from somebody that coached me and my son quite a few years ago. And I don't know where he got it, but I don't think he was the first one to come up with it. But it's a really great way to think about your game and the entire way that you play. And it's thinking of every single shot that you make as a combination of force and friction. And if it helps, you can think of that as F and F. All right, so here's the principle. Right here I've got old school hard bat racket. Most beginners, when they start playing, understand the force part, whether they've ever heard it mentioned or not. I got to hit the ball with enough force to get it over the net, but not so hard that it goes off the table. That's the basics of force. If you hit a strong shot and just flat, that's mostly force. The odd thing about a hard bat is that to play well at hard bat, you can't just play with force, even though some people might think that is the case. You actually need quite a bit of friction, and the better hard bat players can do all the same shots to some extent that they could with sponge rubber. They can loop, they can chop, they can push, they can get serves. You're not going to get as much spin, but as long as it was hard bat, force, friction is a good way of looking at your game. And there's going to be another aspect to it that we're going to get to in a minute, because I know most of you are not playing hard bat and haven't played that in a while. But that's where the theory starts. Force, friction. And I think when players first start off, if you tell them that, they're like, yeah, force would be if I hit it hard. Friction, that seems like that's somebody I know that has a real spinny serve or something, and that must be the friction part of it. True enough, but a far better way to look at it is, say you're hitting your forehand to forehand warm-up. Those shots might be 50% force, 50% friction. If you do it about like that, you're going to get the right mix to control that ball pretty well. Now, I'm just throwing numbers out there. It could be 50-50, 60-40, 70-30 in either direction. Everybody makes shots slightly differently. The rackets are slightly different. And so these are not hard numbers. But if it's 99% force and 1% friction, you're not going to play very well. And you're just not going to have control of the ball. If it's 99% friction, 1% force, that's probably not so great either. At least you learn the friction part of it, but players that play that way frequently aren't giving the ball enough force to make stronger shots. That's been my experience in coaching people. Now, while that's a great way to look at how to play, once sponge rubber came into play, there's another aspect of it. It's still force, friction, but the other thing that you have to think about is when the ball sinks into sponge, which it won't do with hard bat, now you've got force, friction, catapult, okay? Because modern rubber, a lot of it's made to catapult quite a bit. How bouncy is the sponge you put on your racket? How hard is it? How soft is it? Does it have any catapult effect, or does it tend to deaden? I mean, you can get really soft sponge that will give you less force. It's going to slow the ball down. So when you think about how does this game work, this is one way to look at it. I've always thought that the force friction thing made a whole lot of sense, and you always got to keep that in mind. Modern equipment, well, equipment that we've been using for years now, actually, anything with sponge, you have to take into account how long does that ball stay on there? Is it friction, or is it sinking into the sponge and catapulting out? or is it sinking into the sponge and acting more like a pillow and deadening the ball? So, I don't know, might be new to a lot of you, and maybe old stuff to a lot of you, or maybe just gives you a little different perspective on looking at table tennis. But if you look at it that way and you are having trouble with a certain shot, if you missed a shot, you should always at least know. Maybe you used too much force, not enough friction, the other way around. Maybe you aren't taking into account the catapult of the rubber you're using on your racket. All right, thanks. See you next time.